Good evening, everyone. I didn't hear you. Hi, everyone. I'm Tammy Haddad, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to this special evening for a very dear friend of all of ours. And we're here at this fabulous hotel, the Jefferson, and I'd like to introduce you to Peter Grossman, who's one of our co-hosts, Connie Milstein, who's not here tonight. Peter, will you come and say hello?
Thank you. Just very briefly, on behalf of Connie and the Jefferson, wow, I hope that's better. We're absolutely thrilled to be hosting Senator Simpson and his former Chief of Staff and biographer, Donald Hardy, this evening. We're excited to hear from both of them about the book, Shooting from the Lip, which I guess is fitting. Connie was also very proud last year to host a dinner on behalf of the Commission, and then to further support it in its efforts, as I think everybody knows, on the deficit reduction. Not sure that anybody really listened after they got done, but at least they put in the effort. That's apolitical, by the way. In addition, Connie noted that it was no surprise to her at the time that based on Senator Simpson's record in the Senate and his bipartisanship work, that he would be chosen to be a co-chair of that commission. And lastly, I just want to say that, as we understand, Mr. Hardy had full access to Senator Simpson's records, diaries, volumes, full access. And I will say the senator did mention he's been married 57 years. So anybody that gives full access after 57 years, I think that's pretty impressive. But Connie really just wanted to welcome everybody and say we're thrilled to be sponsoring this.
Now I have the pleasure of introducing what I call the bravest man in the world, Don Hardy, the author of the book. I don't know how you could possibly put all of this in one book and decide what to leave in and what to take out. Just as someone who's had Senator Simpson on MSNBC, CNN, and Fox, you have changed the conversation about politics, about culture, about what's important in our country. And Don had to put that all in how many pages? 460. So ladies and gentlemen, Don Hardy.
Wow. What a treat this is. Thank you. Al told me if I ever got in front of a crowd like this, instead of standing in the shadows like I normally do, that I should be very careful what I say, because he said one day you're the toast of the town and the next day you're just toast. So thank you all. Thank you, Peter and Tammy and Ken Levinson is an amazing guy. He put this, I met Ken, and he worked with Lane Bailey and Holly Page, Advocom. I met him 18 years ago in China. He was a great guy then, he's a great guy now. I hope you all get to meet Ken. And if it hadn't been for him, we wouldn't be here tonight. And Jackie Bloom, wherever she is. There. Without her, the invitation list would have been a mess. I've known Al and Ann Simpson for just over 50 years. I grew up in Cody, Wyoming, near Al. I heard all the stories when I was a kid, and then I tried to do them myself a few years later, and he helped me out of that hole. I worked 18 years for Al, all 18 years. I was press secretary and then chief of staff, responsible for all mistakes. And when Al went to retire and went to the Harvard, I went to the Smithsonian and was in charge of government there for a while. Then my wonderful wife, Rebecca, who was right here. I'm telling you, I could not have done this book without Becky. She proved and she researched and she put up with me being up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and she is amazing. So we were retired, went overseas and did a bunch of work with charities and children and blind people and lepers, and came back and ended up on a sailboat. And one day in 2005, the phone connected for some reason to some island tower, and it rang. And it was Al Simpson, and he said, "These guys want to write the story of my life, and they don't know me as well as you do. Would you like to take a shot at it?" And I said, because it was a good life, and I said, I said, just a second, Al, I'm having trouble getting the cork out of this bottle of Chardonnay. But I did, and I said, why would I do that? And he said, because I will give you access to everything in my life. Everything. And I thought I knew a lot, but all of his records, his papers, his speeches, his personal letters from his family members, it was all there. Everything that I could possibly want. And especially the diaries. 6,000 pages were the diaries, 19 binders, and people like David McCullough said the reason that these are valuable is that they were put down, these things, as they happened. So I was at the White House or talking to Gorbachev or Saddam Hussein, and he took notes, and then he dictated it into this diary that ended up being 2.4 million words. Not... So we set sail for the United States, and Al said, how long is this going to take? I said, about a year. That was in 2005. And I said, but something that's really important. I said, people know that I worked for you, and I was loyal to you, and you've been my friend for half a century. They're going to expect this thing will be a puff piece. And it's very important that they not think that after they read it. So I said, you know, it's going to be important that I tell the bad things and the failures in balance along with all the successes. And Al said, look, you just do the right thing by telling the truth. He said, if hair, eyeballs, and teeth land on the floor as a result of telling the truth about me, so be it. So. I also said that I have to have editorial control. If you write anything in this book, people are not going to think they'll think it's a puff piece. And also, you can't have any money. And so, I hold the contract for that with the University of Oklahoma Press. So, Al said, say what you want, but make it true. So I did. The first 3 pages describe what it's like to push a flaming car off a cliff and burn down a house and shoot enough mailboxes to end up on federal probation. Now, the reason that that's important is that it is important because this is not a story about politics. Half of you have probably written books about politics. The bill goes here, the bill goes there, it gets passed, it doesn't get passed, people slug it out in the cloakroom, whatever. This is a book about humanity, about a human being. He happened to be a politician. But this is a story about a person who is extremely human, a person who puts citizenship ahead of partisanship. And that's why it was important to tell this story. And it goes back to the days in which Republicans and Democrats spoke to each other and respected each other. And it doesn't happen as much anymore, but for example, Al Simpson was a great friend of Ted Kennedy. They spoke very late into his life. And people didn't know that, and they didn't understand it, in Wyoming especially. So there's one little story that I have to tell you that it kind of demonstrates the days in which there was friendship, because either one of these guys could get the mic and tell the same exact story. It involves a town meeting in Wyoming. You know, where people come in and they raise their hands and they're upset about something. And this raucous meeting is going on, and Al's presiding over it, and in the door comes Ted Kennedy. And people can't believe it. A guy in the back says, what's this guy doing in Wyoming? Another guy stands up and he says, that Ted Kennedy, he's here in Wyoming. That guy is a horse's ass. Simpson jumps up, runs to the back of the room, grabs the guy, opens the door, and throws him into a snowbank. And when he comes back in, Kennedy says to him, good heavens, that was magnificent, Al. I had no idea that this was Kennedy country. And Al looked at him and said, Ted, it's not. It's horse country. Senator Al Simpson.
Well, this is beyond repair here. Several people have come up to me and said, "Al, let me tell you a new story." I said, "Go ahead. I'm wired." Oh, gee. All right, well, I'll save it till later. Anyway, now, if I started around this room, there's some wonderful people here and I'm not going to do that. I haven't had a drink. Will a little later. But I have to say, Don Hardy took this over, and what he really forgot to say is when he was 17, he borrowed a car, thinking it was a rental from Webster Chevrolet, and drove it to Seattle. It was not a rental, it was called stolen. And he came to me, he said, "I've heard you were a mess. What about me?" I said, "You're a mess, so come on in here." I said, "You're a very salvageable human being." And so we were linked at the hip way back there. That's a true story. But he's done a beautiful job. It's a great book. I read it as a proofreader 3 times, thinking, I found this and that, and boy, I'd dig them up. And then I read it as a reader would read a book, and it had a lump I have a lump in my throat and a laugh throughout. So it's there, and it's a beautiful book, and I love it. There's things could have been left out. I mean, the day I slugged the cop in Laramie, thrown in the clink, called Ann. Ann is here. Ann, would you step up? And I said, "I need $300 bail. I'm in the clink." She said, "Look, I'm working my way through school. I don't have $300. She said, "Just stay there." And I thought, I need to marry her. Saving myself for the Primrose Path. And then in this room is another great and dear friend, Dick and Lynn Cheney. And I won't tell you about Dick Cheney's experiences, especially at the University of Wyoming, which would make mine pale. No, I tell you, we ran together. In 1978, he ran for the Congress, I ran for the Senate, and Lynn and Dick and Annie and I have run every time one of us was running, and neither of us ever lost an election. So that's a tribute to you, Cheney, or to Lynn and Ann. And then back there, standing right next to him, was this little rascal I met behind barbed wire. He was in the Japanese War Relocation Center in Heart Mountain, Wyoming, as a 12-year-old boy, and our scoutmaster said, "We're going to go to Heart Mountain and meet the Boy Scouts." Well, I'll tell you, nobody wanted to go to Heart Mountain. It had wire all around it, guard towers, machine guns, and it was one of those of the 10 relocation centers. And we had a scoutmaster. He said, "These are guys just like us. They're Boy Scouts." I ran into this guy from San Jose, and we really, he was a smart aleck, just like I was. And we had a bully. We picked on that. He picked on us, so it rained that day, and we just dug a little trench right toward his cabin, a little hit. And during the night, it rained like hell, and he ruined his tent, pulled it up, and we just laughed. He said I laughed more than he did, but that's a friendship deep. What's that? No.
You kept me up.
Well, when I read he was mayor of I wrote him. I said, "Remember the fat kid from Cody?" And we started to correspond. We served together in Congress. We served together on the Board of Regents of the Smithsonian. So these are great memories. But as I say, Dick and Lynn, that goes back 40-some years. I could go back to Nina Totenberg, who's in this chamber. She and I had some spirited words. And let me tell you, she and Dave and when I was at Harvard, we had most wonderful times together. Her father is still playing virtuoso violin, and we had a lot of fun. I always, if you can't forgive a person, it's like letting them live in your head rent-free. Now don't miss that. That's not a funny statement. If you can't forgive a person, it's like letting them live in your head rent-free. I mean, you're in the shower thinking, "That son of a bitch," and he's out he's golfing. So what do you gain from that? And then, of course, Billington is lurking over here. I can't go through all this. Clarence Thomas was here. Clarence, boy, amazing things you go through. I had met Anita Hill. I've met her I say to people, why don't you move on? What is the purpose of keeping tab, seething? They're the seethers and the seekers. I prefer the seekers. Anyway, Billington, he's up for Library of Congress. There's another guy up there, a real wizard, and the staff, Reagan's staff, wanted that guy. So I'm sitting next to Ron Reagan. I said, Ron, I really love the guy. I'm in his diary a lot, I'll tell you. I said, I think you want to think of this guy, Billington. He said, yeah, Al, why would that be? I said, he hates commies. And I said, not only that, he knows Russian fluently. He can tell just exactly when those sons of bitches are what they're saying, and he knows what they're saying. He said, really? 3 days later, who is still our librarian of the Library of Congress. Great storyline. John Dingle, where's that rascal back there? And he and I know, but I can't stop. But Dingle and I used to meet on conference committees, and he'd say, look, we're going to get this done. And I said, who are you going to diddle before the 10 days is over? He said, and he named a guy. He said, why don't you do something with the staff of that committee in the Senate? I said, I can't. They're tougher than I am. But then we got together and just beat them to bits. And Chuck, Robb, and I were on the Iraq study group. It is important. You can't, what the hell's happened? The word compromise now means you're a wimp. That's madness. You can't do it. And here's Bruce Reed, who was the executive director of the Commission on, co-chaired by Erskine and I, from Idaho. I don't know how you got into that. Well, I'm not going to go any further. I see Corlogus lurking over there, one of my students at Harvard. Now, Ann has cleared her throat 3 times. And none of you have heard it, but I have heard it. And so I just want to say we're going to stick around, and I want to thank these sponsors, because the test of an event like this, I go up, I said, how's the wine? They said, better than anything you ever bought. And so I'm now that I've finished, I'll be having one. But look, there's something I wanted to, if you have a book, and I just don't want to just scribble my name. You can get those out there. If you have a book and you want me to do some personalization, just leave it, and we'll put a slip of paper in there, and eventually I'll get them back, or they'll be here in Washington with Mike Tonger. Mike, my dear pal, my chief of staff, where is he? Anyway, Mike and Laylee, you were the finest staffer I've ever known. And you'll wear your crown in heaven, certainly not here. And Becky, you met Becky here, Becky. All right. This is like the picture of Dorian Gray. I am falling apart, and this picture is eternal. Dorian Gray was the opposite. The picture aged, and he never did. He sold his soul, and then he ended up in a pile of bones, a cadaverish mess. But that is a beautiful thing. Anyway, Annie and I are having fun, and to think that I do these things is just one reason. This wonderful guy right here, and I've never received a penny. Thank you for coming. Thank you. Stick around. What? Oh. Oh, my sakes.